the day I found the original notarized partnership paperwork inside the false bottom of a 1958 Overlander's propane locker. My stepson Todd had already sold my entire fleet of restored Airstream trailers to a boutique hotel group for $620,000 and mailed me a check for $3,900 labeled propane. I had spent 27 years as a school custodian, so I knew the difference between a gas valve and a gaslight. That single sheet of paper, the one Todd never knew existed, was the reason he now spends his afternoons resewing trailer cushions in coveralls that say Riveted by lies, while every booking confirmation from my glamping business prints his fraud docket number. My name is Elaine. For 27 years I was the night custodian at Lincoln Elementary, the woman who rebuilt boiler ignitors blindfolded, rekeyed every padlock on the district's equipment cage, and could tell a failing bearing by the way a wrench vibrated in my hand. I balanced the maintenance budget on a clipboard every June, down to the last barks of blue sharp towels. I knew which chemical would strip wax off a hallway floor without etching the tile, and which torque spec would keep a handrail anchored for a decade. One February, a contractor quoted the school $2,000 to replace a circulator pump on the boiler. I opened the access panel, listened to the motor with a screwdriver held to my ear, and found a bad capacitor that cost $11 at the supply house. The next day the principal asked me why I hadn't gone to college. I told him I liked fixing things more than I liked talking about fixing things. That skill with small parts and hidden compartments is what saved me later, because Todd never understood that a woman who spends her nights repairing what other people break learns to notice every loose screw. My late husband Arthur was a quiet civil engineer who kept every receipt, balanced his checkbook to the penny, and told me more than once that a signature is only as good as the paper trail behind it. He did not talk much, but when he did, it was usually about something that would pay off later. He kept a green ledger in the garage where he wrote down the date, mileage, and cost of every repair on every vehicle we ever owned, and he taught me that a liberal application of penetrating oil and patience would break free a bolt that brute force would only round off. He also taught me to read the fine print on any document before I signed it, because the fine print is where people hide their intentions. When Arthur died of a stroke on a Tuesday morning in November, I was left with $112,000 in life insurance and a stepson I had raised since he was 9 but never fully trusted. I also had a 1958 Airstream Overlander parked behind the barn, the one Arthur had bought half restored and never finished. He used to say that trailer was the only thing that never lied to him. I found Arthur on the bathroom floor at 6:15 in the morning. He had been getting ready for his daily walk, the same walk he took every day at the same time, wearing the same brown shoes he had resoled 3 times because he refused to buy new ones. The paramedics arrived in 8 minutes, but he was already gone. Todd showed up at the hospital 2 hours later, wearing a golf shirt and looking at his phone. He asked the admitting nurse for a copy of the death certificate before he asked how I was doing. He hugged me with one arm and said, "We'll get through this, Elaine." Then he stepped into the hallway and I heard him say to Marsha on the phone, "The policy has to be at least $100,000. I stood there in the waiting room with my purse clutched against my chest and understood exactly what the next year of my life was going to look like. The funeral was barely over before the vultures circled. Todd and his wife Marsha arrived from their condo in Scottsdale in a leased black Escalade. Todd wore a charcoal suit and kept checking his phone during the graveside service. Marsha took photographs of my kitchen with her phone while pretending to look for a casserole dish. She opened my china cabinet and asked which pieces were the most valuable because she said she wanted to make sure they were properly insured. Todd walked through the house with a clipboard and talked about liquid assets, probate, and what he called my cognitive decline. He pointed to the fuse box and said I was a danger to myself. He looked out the kitchen window at the old Overlander and said, "That thing is scrap. I'll have a haul-off crew here tomorrow." I said nothing. I had learned from 27 years of watching administrators make bad decisions that sometimes the smartest move is to let people think you are too slow to object. That night, after Todd and Marsha went back to their hotel, I walked out to the Overlander with a flashlight and a pair of work gloves. The trailer was a 1958 Overlander, 26 feet of aluminum panels in a row, with a dent on the front from a hailstorm in 1973 and the original rivet still holding along the beltline. I ran my hand along the skin and felt the slight ripple where a panel had been replaced after a tree branch fell in 1989. The propane locker was on the curbside, behind a small door with 2 wing nuts. I had opened that locker a dozen times over the years, usually to check for mud dauber nests or to make sure the tanks were strapped down. Arthur had taught me to look inside every compartment on the trailer at least once a season, because moisture and rodents and time will find any weakness. This time I reached behind the tanks along the skirt wall and felt something that was not supposed to be there. A false panel, fiberglass, cut to match the floor exactly. Underneath it was a greasy maintenance log with a cracked vinyl cover. I opened it. The first 40 pages were just oil change dates and tire pressures in Arthur's tight, even handwriting. Page 32 had a note that said left rear tire holds 48 psi, check before every trip. Page 38 had a list of every campground we had stayed in between 1999 and 2004. The last page had one line in the same hand, pressed hard enough to leave grooves in the paper. Do not trust them, save yourself. I stood there in the dark with that page in my hand and thought about every time Arthur had looked at Todd and said nothing. I understood then that my husband had not been quiet because he was unaware. He had been quiet because he was watching. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe paper never lies but people do. Within a week, Todd and Marcia had a lawyer draw up a durable power of attorney and a quitclaim deed on my house. They called it taking care of you. Todd sat at my kitchen table, spread the papers out and said, Elaine, you're grieving, your mind is foggy, let us handle the money. He had a Mont Blanc pen ready, cap off. The lawyer was a man named Philip who had played golf with Todd in Scottsdale. He did not ask me any questions about my mental state. He just pointed to the signature lines and said, this is standard. I played the part perfectly. I stared at the signature line, adjusted my reading glasses and said I needed to look at the big words. I told them I was confused by all the legal language and I would sign it after I had my eyes checked. Todd sighed and put the pen down. He said, fine, but don't take too long. The bank needs these. 2 weeks later, they moved me into their spare bedroom under the guise of care, the one at the back of the house with a lock on the outside of the door. The window had a security bar across it, and the only phone was a landline in the kitchen that they monitored. I packed one suitcase and my old custodial tool roll, the one I had kept from the school because it had my lock picks, my feeler gauges, my mirror on a stick, and the small flashlight that had helped me diagnose 1,000 boiler ignitors. Marcia took my mail. Todd handled my phone and changed my voicemail password. I let them think I was too foggy to notice the lock on my door was on the outside. I even asked Marcia once if the door handle was loose, just to see her lie to my face. Said, honey, every door in this house has that kind of lock. The life insurance money landed in my account 60 days after Arthur's death. Todd and Marcia found out within hours because they had set up text alerts on my phone. Todd came to me with a pitch. He called it a family legacy project. Vintage Airstream trailers, fully restored, parked on a lakefront property, rented out as glamping units. He said we could buy 4 or 5 of them, restore them, and make a steady income. He said it would keep the money safe from taxes and give the grandkids a free place to stay every summer. He had a spreadsheet on his laptop and a glossy brochure from a real estate company. I knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted the money in physical assets with his name on them. But I also knew trailers have titles. Titles have VIN numbers and the law likes paper, so I agreed with conditions. I hired my own notary, a woman named Ruth who had a small office next to the feed store. She had known Arthur for 30 years and had notarized the deed on our house in 1994. I drafted the partnership agreement myself on a template from the county law library, and I made Ruth watch me sign it. The agreement said Todd got a 50% share and I got 50%, plus a lifetime of free summer weekends for my grandkids, written as a separate addendum. It also said that no sale of any titled asset could occur without the physical presence and notarized original signatures of both partners, and that the original partnership agreement had to be presented at the time of transfer. No facsimile, no photocopy, no electronic signature would be accepted. That clause was mine, and I wrote it in capital letters. Todd was too busy checking his phone to read it. He signed, Ruth stamped it with her blue ink notary seal, logged it in her journal and made 2 certified copies. I kept the original. The original notarized agreement, the one with the blue ink stamp and Ruth's journal number, I did not leave in the filing cabinet at the house. I wrapped it in a Ziploc bag and put it inside the false bottom of the 1958 Overlander's propane locker, right where Arthur had hidden his warning. Todd would never go near a propane tank if he could help it. Over the next 6 months, I did most of the actual restoration work. I had the skills. I rebuilt the aluminum skin on a 1963 Globetrotter, resealed the seams on a 1969 Tradewind, replaced the axle on a 1970 Safari, and rewired the 12-volt system on a 1967 caravel. I used a bucking bar and a rivet gun the way other women use a sewing machine. The Globetrotter had a rotted subfloor from a leaky vent, so I tore out the old plywood, cut new marine-grade panels with a circular saw, and sealed the edges with epoxy. The Tradewind's aluminum skin had corrosion along the beltline from years of road salt, so I sanded the panels with a random orbital sander, polished them with a wool pad and compound, and watched the reflection come back like a mirror. The axle on the Safari was bent, so I ordered a new one from a supplier in Ohio, unbolted the old springs and shackles, and torqued every nut to the manufacturer's spec with a click-type torque wrench. The caravel's wiring was a fire hazard, so I pulled every wire, labeled each circuit with masking tape, and installed a new converter and fuse block with marine-grade connectors and heat-shrink tubing. I even stamped new serial numbers into the frame rails with a set of letter punches I borrowed from the high school auto shop, so the VIN plates matched the titles exactly. Todd took the photos for the website and called himself the founder. He posed with his arms crossed in front of the trailers, wearing a brand new flannel shirt that had never seen a rivet gun. Marcia ordered custom pendant lights and imported Moroccan rugs. She had a logo designed and ordered matching coffee mugs and keychains. The first summer we sold out every weekend. The bank account grew. I watched the numbers and kept every receipt in a binder the way Arthur had taught me. Then Todd started acting strange. He would take phone calls on the back deck, pacing in tight circles, his voice dropping whenever I walked outside with a bucket of screws. He would hang up and say it was a telemarketer. Marcia started ordering things that made no sense for a bootstrapped glamping business. A $3,000 espresso machine, a designer dog bed for a dog they did not own, a $600 set of linen napkins monogrammed with the logo she had designed. Todd missed 2 payments on the loan we had taken for the lakefront lease, then blamed it on the bank. I found a late notice in the trash can under a pile of coffee grounds and smoothed it out with my palm. The bank had sent 3 notices and the third one said the loan was in default. I folded it and put it in my tool roll. The break came on a Thursday morning in March. The kitchen sink at Todd and Marcia's house started backing up and Marcia called a plumber. The quote was $800. I said I would fix it myself. I went under the sink with a basin wrench and a bucket. The P-trap was full of a grey sludge that looked like oatmeal and hair, along with a missing teaspoon. I cleaned it out, reseated the slip joint washers and tightened everything back down. The whole job took me 40 minutes and cost nothing. While I was under there, I noticed the baseboard behind the sink was not nailed to the wall. It had been cut and set in place, and behind it was a bundle of papers wrapped in a rubber band. I did not open it there. I waited until Todd and Marcia went to a wine tasting that Friday evening, then I went into Todd's office. The door had a cheap wafer lock, the same kind we used on the school book closets. I had a tension wrench and a rake pick in my tool roll. The tension wrench was an old windshield wiper insert I had bent with pliers 20 years earlier. The rake pick was a feeler gauge I had filed down to a shallow wave pattern. I inserted the tension wrench into the bottom of the keyway and applied light pressure with my thumb, then I raked the pick across the pins 3 times. It took me 11 seconds. The lock turned with a soft click. Inside the office, I found the filing cabinet unlocked but rigged with a string and a piece of tape to show if it had been opened. A piece of clear tape was stretched from the top drawer to the side of the cabinet, and a strand of white thread hung from the handle. I lifted the string with the tip of a screwdriver and opened the second drawer without disturbing the tape. Inside was a folder labeled Insurance. It contained photocopies of my signature on documents I had never signed, a loan application for $90,000 using the trailers as collateral, listing me as the guarantor, with a signature that was not mine but was close enough to fool a bank teller. The loan was from a company called Arrowhead Capital, with an annual percentage rate of 11.9% and monthly payments of $1,842. The loan was set to close in 2 days. A draft title transfer for the entire fleet, made out to something called Sagebrush Hospitality Group, with a purchase price of $620,000, and a line at the bottom that said seller represents all titles are free and clear of liens. The VIN numbers for all 6 trailers were listed on the second page, and an email printout from Todd to a man named Derek at Sagebrush, saying, "The old lady is slow, but we can close by Friday if I get the titles. She won't notice until the money is gone." I photographed every page with my phone, using a scanner app that saved the images as PDF files. Then I put everything back exactly as I found it, replacing the string and the tape. I had to practice the tape placement 3 times to make sure the edges lined up. I walked out of that office and went to the Overlander. The original partnership paperwork was still there, dry and perfect inside the Ziploc bag. I read the clause I had written myself. Any sale of partnership assets required both partners' notarized signatures and the presentation of the original agreement. Todd had neither. I knew then that the sale could be voided, but I needed more. I also knew I needed to talk to someone who could freeze the money before it vanished. The next morning, I called the life insurance company to ask about a beneficiary change. That was a cover story. What I really wanted was the name of the fraud compliance officer who had handled Arthur's policy. The customer service representative transferred me to a department that handled policy modifications. I asked for the name of the compliance officer assigned to Arthur's policy. The woman on the phone was cautious, but she gave me an extension. I called it and reached a man named Craig Delgado. I said, "My name is Elaine. My husband Arthur had a policy with your company. He told me once that if anyone ever tried to move money into a business with his son Todd, I should call this number." There was a pause long enough that I could hear the fluorescent hum of an office in the background. Then Craig said, "Mrs. Ellis, I was hoping you would call. Your husband left something with us." Arthur had been a quiet man, but he had not been blind. 6 months before he died, he had sat in Craig's office and recorded a notarized affidavit. The affidavit said that his son Todd had a history of financial exploitation, that Arthur believed Todd would try to access any life insurance proceeds after his death, and that Arthur wanted a dead man's switch placed on the policy. The switch worked like this. The full payout had been deposited into a restricted trust account at a small regional bank. I could access the money, but only in person with my physical signature, my thumbprint, and a verbal passphrase that Arthur had chosen. The passphrase was propane locker. Any attempt to transfer more than $10,000 out of that account to any entity associated with Todd would automatically freeze the funds and trigger a fraud review. Arthur had set the trap years ago. Craig told me that the $620,000 transfer from Sagebrush Hospitality Group had just hit the freeze. The bank had flagged it because Todd had tried to deposit the check into the business account, but the check was made out to both partners and required my signature. Todd had forged my name. The bank had already called the police. Craig asked me to come to the bank the next morning with the original partnership agreement. He said the bank would need it to void the sale and unfreeze the legitimate business assets. I told him I would be there. Then I called my lawyer, a woman named Denise who had handled Arthur's probate. She said one sentence, "Bring the paper and do not sign anything." She also told me not to tell Todd or Marcia that I had called her, and not to leave the house without my purse. I said, "I haven't left the house without my purse since 1971. That purse held my wallet, my phone, Arthur's warning page in a Ziploc bag, and the original notarized partnership agreement folded flat. I had stopped trusting the fireproof safe in the house the day Todd asked me for the combination. That night I decided to test Todd one last time. I had seen the forged signature, the loan application, the email calling me slow, but some part of me wanted to believe there was a line he would not cross. I staged a medical scare. I waited until Todd and Marcia were both in the living room, watching a home renovation show and drinking wine. I printed the photographed documents at the public library using a computer and a thumb drive, not my phone, to avoid any metadata linking back to me. I used the library's black and white printer, paid cash for the copies, and wiped the thumb drive clean on a public terminal before I left. I put the pages in a manila folder and walked into the living room. I clutched my chest, dropped to my knees, and made a gurgling sound low in my throat. I had practiced the sound in the bathroom mirror until it was convincing. Todd looked at me. Then he looked at the folder in my hand. He stepped over my legs, bent down, and tried to pry it from my fingers. He did not call 911. He did not check my pulse. He did not ask if I was okay. He said, "Give me that, you old bat." Marcia stood in the doorway and said, "She's faking. She always was dramatic." I let go of the folder and stopped breathing for a count of 10. Todd opened it and started flipping pages. His face went from annoyance to white to a deep red as he saw the email printout and the loan application. I had spoon-fed him chicken soup when he had the flu at age 9. I had taught him to drive in the parking lot of Lincoln Elementary. I had stayed up with him all night when he was scared of thunderstorms, and he stepped over my body to grab a folder. That was the moment every remaining bit of family loyalty I had left evaporated like propane from an open valve. The next morning, Todd told me we were going to the bank to sign a release so the sale could go through. He said it was just a formality. He did not know I had spoken to Craig. He did not know about the original partnership agreement in the propane locker. He thought I was still foggy, still compliant, still the stepmom who had spent 27 years mopping floors and trusting the wrong people. He laid out a pressed blouse and said, "Wear this, you need to look respectable." I put on my best cardigan and said, "Okay, Todd." He drove. Marcia sat in the back seat reading a home decor magazine, occasionally pointing out window treatments to Todd as if we were on our way to a garden party. I held my purse with both hands and felt the outline of the original partnership agreement inside. At the bank, a young teller named Becca led us to a conference room on the second floor. The room had a long walnut table, water glasses, and a notary station in the corner. Craig Delgado was there, along with a uniformed police officer and 2 men in suits from the bank's fraud unit. Todd started talking fast, waving a paper. He said, "My stepmother is elderly and confused, but she wants to sign the release. We just need the notary. She's been forgetful lately, so I've been handling everything for her." He handed the paper to Craig, who did not take it. Craig looked at me and said, "Mrs. Ellis, do you have the passphrase?" I said, "Propane locker." Todd's face went white. The police officer stepped forward and said, "Todd Ellis, you are under arrest." Todd started stuttering. "That's not what that is. She's lying. She's confused. She has dementia. I have her medical records." Craig held up a printout of the wire transfer request and said, "We have the forged signature. We have the email." The notary public looked at the release Todd had brought and compared it to the signature card on file. She said, "This signature does not match." Marcia tried to stand up and walk out, but another officer was already blocking the door. She sat back down and folded her arms, saying, "I had nothing to do with any of this." The fraud unit investigator opened a tablet and showed the email printout where Todd called me slow and said I would not notice until the money was gone. I reached into my purse and pulled out the original notarized partnership agreement, the one with Ruth's blue ink stamp. I laid it on the table next to the $3,900 check labeled propane. I said, "I don't sign fraud." Those 4 words were the last thing I said before they took Todd and Marcia out in handcuffs. What followed was a slow, satisfying unraveling. The bank froze the $620,000 payment. The original partnership agreement voided the sale to Sagebrush Hospitality Group because it required both partners' notarized signatures, and Todd had only a forged title transfer. The hotel group backed out, threatened to sue Todd, and then sued him for fraud. Their legal team called me and asked for copies of the partnership agreement and Todd's email. I provided them because I believed in helping people who had been lied to. The police found the $90,000 loan application with my forged signature in Todd's office, along with the email to Derek. They also found text messages between Todd and Marcia discussing how to get me declared incompetent so they could take control of the money. One message from Marcia read, "Just get her to sign the POA and we can move her into assisted living." Todd was charged with forgery, grand larceny, wire fraud, attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and conspiracy. Marcia was charged with conspiracy and obstruction. Their condo was seized by the bank for the unpaid loan. The leased Escalade went back to the dealer. Todd's fraud docket number became public record. I got the trailers back. The judge voided the sale and returned the titles to the partnership, then ordered Todd's share auction to satisfy the restitution. I bid on that share with the money from the first good summer season and I won. There were 4 other bidders, but I had cash and I knew the value of every trailer down to the last rivet. I renamed the business hitch of Betrayal Glamping. The booking confirmation email now prints Todd's fraud docket number at the bottom, right above the cancellation policy. The first guest who noticed it asked me if it was a joke. I said, "No, it's a warning." Todd was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, but he got out early for good behavior and was ordered to complete 2,000 hours of community restitution. I offered him a job. He reseams trailer cushions in a workshop behind the lakefront office, wearing coveralls that say Riveted by Lies on the back. The first day he showed up, I handed him the coveralls and said, "Every stitch you sew is a reminder." He did not look me in the eye. Marcia works the laundry line, folding sheets and washing pillowcases under supervision. The grandkids still get their free summer weekends. They call it Camp Betrayal and they laugh about it because they are young and they do not fully understand what their father did. Arthur's warning sits framed in my office next to the original partnership agreement and the $3,900 propane check, which I never cashed. I have thought a lot about Arthur since this all ended. He did not leave me a fortune. He left me a paper trail, a dead man switch, and 1 sentence in an old maintenance log. That was enough. He knew who Todd was, and he trusted me to find the truth and save myself. The day I found that note, I thought I had lost everything. I did not know I had already been handed the key. A key is only useful if you know which lark it fits, and Arthur spent 27 years teaching me how to read the lark. I used to think of myself as just a custodian, but a custodian is someone who keeps things working, who notices the small cracks before they split open, who knows that a little maintenance now prevents a collapse later. Arthur understood that. He did not need to give me a map, he just needed to point me toward the false bottom. Now every time a guest parks a trailer and picks up their confirmation, I watch them read the fraud docket number and look up at the sign above the office, the one that says Hitch of Betrayal Glamping. And I think Arthur would have liked that sign. It tells the truth. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. If this story reminded you that the quiet ones are often the ones paying the closest attention, hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.